And I think a lot of parents are shocked now that they're teaching their children themselves. They can't focus, and it's because of the foods in the house.
Welcome, friends. Mike Blasi here from Apodcast.com. Question for you. Have you ever thought that you were addicted to a food? Maybe you've said, oh, I'm addicted to that chocolate or that ice cream. Well, today we have Joan Ifland, Dr. Joan Ifland, and she's an expert in processed food addiction. Now, Dr. Ifland literally wrote the textbook on processed food addiction. She has a BA in economics and political science from Oberlin College, an MBA from Stanford, and a Ph.D. in interdisciplinary studies with specialization in addiction nutrition. She was the first chair of the Food Addiction Council, and she's authored a couple different books. One of them, Sugars and Flours, How They Make Us Crazy, Sick, and Fat. And the other one is this Processed Food Addiction. This is basically the textbook for practitioners on how to treat processed food addiction. She currently runs an organization at foodaddictionreset.com that compassionately assists people with recovery from processed food addiction. Dr. Joan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I'm really passionate about this topic, and I'm excited to learn from you and to share that knowledge with our viewers.
Thank you.
So let's just start with the basics. Can you define processed food addiction for us and maybe compare it to just overeating real food in general?
So this is a very specific disease. We know from brain imaging research that very specific activities in the brain are altered. So that's how we know that it's an addiction. It's not overeating. It's because the same things that go on in the brains of drug and alcohol addicts are going on in the brains of quote unquote overeaters. So it's the argument is over. You have these hyperactive reward center neurons. They're putting out a lot of neurotransmitter, dopamine, serotonin, endocannabinoid, and opiate. And you have a hyperactive stress system and hypoactive, like the frontal lobe is not firing. So you've got this locomotive going down the side of the mountain and the brakes are gone. It's a two-part dysfunction in the brain, but it's very distinctive, and it's not like it could be something else. It's our best evidence that we are dealing with an addiction and not just overeating. Overeating would occur if, occasionally somebody put too much food in front of you and maybe you weren't paying attention and you ate the whole thing. That can happen, but that's not what the brains of overeaters are telling us. This is truly a substance addiction. It's not a behavioral addiction. That's not like gambling or sex addiction or shopping addiction. It's substances. It's like cocaine addiction or alcohol addiction or marijuana addiction or even heroin. There is activity in the brain that is responding to substances specifically.
Yeah, and I like, if I understood this right, I like that analogy of the locomotive and the brakes not working because, I heard in another podcast you explaining this, that, the main portion of our brain, it's been evolving for millions of years, and this frontal cortex, which is the kind of the rational side, if I remember right, of the brain that you tell yourself to stop, that's really thin and it's very new. So it's like a giant and a gnat, right? The size differences.
Yes, the frontal lobe is only about 2% of the brain, and it is new, and it's the least important part of the brain. The rest of the brain, the other 98% of the brain, is focused on keeping us alive. The frontal lobe is focused on, philosophy and language and arts, none of which has to do with keeping us alive. So the other 98% of the brain has priority. It gets the blood flow. And when it's active, there's not enough blood flow for the frontal lobe. And so this is why people continue to eat even when they know better. Know better is up here in the frontal lobe. It's part of the braking system. But when that addiction gets going, that part of your computer has crashed. And you can't get data out of it, and it can't control your behavior. And I love explaining this because once people know that, they know it's not their fault. They know that they could study, talk to nutritionists and dietitians and nurses and health coaches all the time who don't have control of their own food.
Right.
And they're saying, I studied this. I took this degree. I have a master's in this. I have a BA in this. I have a doctorate in this. And my own eating is not under control. It's because all that knowledge is in that little tiny frontal lobe. And all the food industry has activated the other 98% of the brain. It's not a fair fight at all.
Yeah, and let's dive into that a little bit, right? And I'm not condemning the food industry for trying make a profit. That's what capitalism's all about, right? But they have food scientists and researchers and whole teams of people that are trying to make these food-like substances very palatable and addictive. So tell us a little bit about your research into that. And also, tag along the marketing piece that is similar to the cigarette marketing that happened.
Oh, there are a lot of people on the planet bringing this to light. We have Michael Moss's book, Sugar, Fat, Salt, Nina Teicholz's Fat Chance. Nina's book is Big Fat Lie. But now we have also researchers at the University of California, San Francisco publishing from documents that the tobacco companies submitted as part of their settlement in the courts. So 40,000 documents got submitted into a depository at University of California, San Francisco, and they're publishing about it. And last year they published a paper. It was just hard to read. In 1963, R.J. Reynolds bought Hawaiian Punch. Why? Because they knew how to do the addiction business model for tobacco. And they thought that they could use that same model for sugar. Tobacco for adults, sugar for children. And the marketing model is described. It's called surround marketing. And first you addict the reward pathways. So they're now sensitive, they're now reactive, they're now going to respond to a cue. And then you surround that poor addicted brain with provocation, with stimulation. So this person is their brain is helplessly pushing out these addictive neurotransmitters like all the time. And so this worked very well with tobacco. You had cigarettes everywhere. They were in vending machines. You couldn't go anywhere where you couldn't buy a cigarette. And they were very cheap to start with, and they were heavily advertised. You went to a sporting event, there was tobacco being advertised. Entertainment, television, billboards, stores, commercial environments, you were always being constantly reminded, which provokes the addiction, which provokes the release of these addictive neurotransmitters, which then leads to control of behavior. You've got behavior centers in the brain, and whoever's putting out the most neurotransmitter gets to control behavior. And if your frontal lobe is not firing, it cannot control behavior. So they took that model and they transferred it to sugar and targeted small children. It's just horrific. So for Hawaiian Punch, for example, you see a lot of Hawaiian Punch branded toys. because they know where those children are. Those children are at home playing.
Yeah, and I remember
and they want them to be surrounded by reminders of Hawaiian Punch. Eventually, they took the cigarette package concept and transferred it into juice boxes. They did things later on in the development of the sugar addiction in children market, like creating sugar from apples. Apple juice concentrate is just sugar derived from apples.
Right.
But they could put that on a package and they could say, no sugar.
Yeah, 100% fruit juice. Yeah.
Yeah, they could even start making healthy claims. And, oh gosh, it's vicious. I mean, I think it's fair. That's a fair word to use for what those tobacco executives did. Starting with Hawaiian Punch, the big problem there was that there was a sugar cartel in Florida. They had control of sugar pricing. But once 1980 came along and we had high fructose corn syrup everywhere, then the sweetener became very cheap. And within 5 years, you see Nabisco, General Foods, and Kraft, boom, just purchased by the tobacco industry. And immediately, within 10 years, you have a 50% increase in the rate of obesity in children, from 10% to 15%. Huge. They knew how to do it. They came in with the technology. They came in with the expertise. They knew how to advertise. They knew how to formulate product. There was a consultant, Howard Moskowitz, who developed the intense data process to maximize the amount of sugar, fat, salt in products. They had little control over food additives, and they marketed it to very, very small children. I had to put down Michael Moss's book for like a year and pick it up again before I could finish reading it. The idea that people would deliberately and knowingly do this to children, it's bad enough to addict adults. And it used to be that our government would protect children. So like the Joe Camel campaign, very specifically designed to get 10-year-old boys to smoke. That was stopped. The FCC said no. But our government is no longer able to do that. This is too big. The food industry is more powerful than certainly our U.S. federal government.
Yeah, I remember, the cereal commercials on the Saturday morning cartoons, right? They'd always have the sugary cereal commercials, and, I collected the little points on the KoolAid packets, right? So KoolAid had this little point system, just like you were saying with the Hawaiian Punch, where you get so many points, you can trade it in for some kind of toy, right? So the marketing's out there, and I think we can tell from the obesity epidemic that it's worked very well.
It's worked tragically well. And you're having those KoolAid items. It's just, the whole idea was taken from like Marlboro lighters or Marlboro jackets. There's this warehouse where you can get this really cool merchandise. And all these concepts were just carried straight over to children and sugar. It's just diabolical.
So let's talk about the researchers or the scientists that are in these processed food companies. What are they trying to do, and what kind of research do they have into the pleasure centers of the brain and making those substances addictive?
Well, they have their own brain imaging equipment, and they can put images in front of people and watch exactly where their brains light up. They can have them taste things inside the MRI machines and watch where their brains light up.
Oh, wow.
So with the advent of brain imaging technology in the late 1990s, they could be very precise about, creating the addiction. So these substances are very addictive. Like sugar is more addictive, has been shown to be more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah.
And here we are just, ladling out to our children.
And it's everywhere, right? That's the problem, is every convenience store has it. They go to school and they get these things, and they're at their friend's house and they have it in abundance. And it's just, that's why I love talking to you and understanding and getting this message out, because it's like a cultural shift we have to go through, right? Because it's just so common and so accepted.
Yeah, we have... This is a very, very long and steep road, but that's why I'm so grateful to you, Mike. You can't believe how many people will be in touch with me from listening to this podcast. You are actively saving people. Addictions are very hard to get over in the first place because of the cueing, because of the triggering, because of the stimulation in the environment. If you could just get the stimulation out of the environment and make the substances very hard to get, then people would quit. That is what happened with cigarettes. The Surgeon General in 1964, who was not corrupt, came out and said, look, tobacco causes cancer. So legislators at that time could take action. They were still, independent enough or had enough integrity to take action. And it was taxes and more taxes and more taxes and more taxes until the product became out of the reach of a lot of people. They just weren't willing to spend that kind of money anymore. Plus, of course, you had the processed food industry coming right in so that you could transfer the addiction from nicotine to sugar and glutamorphine, etc. And they stopped the advertising. So you weren't being provoked all the time. And the prevalence of smoking went from like 66% to 16%.
Wow.
And yes, it took 50 years. They didn't go down without a fight, but there are definite and specific public policies that can be used. They took the availability away. You had to show an ID. They couldn't addict the young people so readily anymore. It was just harder to get. There were barriers to getting the tobacco. And it works. It works. But our government today doesn't have the power. I think power to do that kind of thing for this. There are many more substances. It's sugars, and it's glutamorphine, and it's excessive salt, and it's processed fats, and it's the casomorphines in dairy, and it's caffeine, and then all the food additives. So this is not where we're going to get help on this one. It's going to be from people like you.
Well, thank you.
People don't know that their depression and their irritability and their anxiety are coming out of the processed foods. They don't know that their fatigue and their hormone problems are coming out of the processed foods. So the more that we educate people about it, it's coming from here. And you can't take a pill and make it go away. The more people will give it up. They just will give it up. Yeah.
And I love how I listened to another podcast where you're focused on children specifically. And, it's the same thing. It's showing the compassion and not judging and not making them feel guilty, but making that connection between what they're eating and how they're feeling. So go into that process a little bit, especially for parents, how they can make that association between those two things.
Oh, it's so hard. It's really hard. So the food industry really went after children. In 1985, there were like 160 sugary, fatty, salty food commercials. And within 7 or 8 years, it's like 560. And then the obesity epidemic just erupts after that. So parents, of course, had no idea. They had no idea that by letting their children watch this TV, this was Nickelodeon, which reached 65 million households, carrying these Saturday morning cartoon commercials. The parents had no idea. You know, Nickelodeon has this very safe kind of branding. And there they were, addicting millions of children. So you figure 65 million households, maybe an average of 2 kids per household, 130 million children. That's really all the children in the U.S. Very few exceptions would not have seen those commercials.
Yeah, I think most people had a TV. Yeah, most people had it. Sorry to interrupt, but I think most people had a TV at that time, right? And if they didn't, they went over to a friend's house. Yeah.
And we know, we have research showing that it only takes 5 commercials to persuade a toddler. So it was an unbelievably great research project. It was done at Stanford. Took kids, divided it into 2 groups. One group got an hour's program with no commercials. The other group got 5 commercials for a product. And then they turned them all into a room with tons of different products. The kids who had seen the 5 commercials went for that product. The kids who had seen no commercials chose a lot of different products. It only takes 5 commercials, and there they were being shown 500 commercials. It was over. I mean, it was over before it began. So kids, of course, are begging for these cereals. They think that the cartoon characters are their friends. The manipulation is just merciless. And now children are going to their parents and nagging, wearing their parents down for fast food, for sugary cereals, for these quote-unquote convenience lunches. It's just, it was over. Like, we were sitting ducks. We didn't have a chance. So now we have this vast population of addicted children, and the parents are addicted. And the one thing about processed food addiction, it makes people tired, and it makes them depressed, and it makes them brain fogged. And that is not a position from which you can get a child through withdrawal and then keep them safe. You have to be strong and clear-headed to do that. So in my opinion, in my experience, if you get the parents on board, the children will follow. But you cannot start with the children. Like, it just makes me crazy when somebody says, well, I teach my children, and they know better.
They follow your example.
As soon as they get out in the culture and the craving bombardment starts, everything that you taught them will be in a crashed part of the brain. It won't do them any good at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to give a good example of that. So, I went through my own health journey last year and lost 55 pounds in 11 weeks, and have been able to keep most of it off through mostly animal-based diet this last year. But I went through that same experience. Like, after I got the pounds off and was eating good foods, like, my mental clarity went from like here to way up here, right? And I was more motivated to pursue my passions and to try new things, and just had a lot more energy. So
it's
I can definitely see that.
It's the coolest. Yeah. And the same thing happens to children. The attention deficit label, gone. The learning disabled label, gone. The poor impulse control, gone. Those are all frontal lobe functions. And when you get the blood supply going to the frontal lobe again, that kid is fine. Yeah.
So is that what's happening, that these processed foods are stopping blood supply to the frontal lobe?
They activate the limbic system, stress system, food-seeking systems so violently that the blood supply is going to those parts of the brain and not to the frontal lobe. It's why children can't learn. And I think a lot of parents are shocked now that they're teaching their children themselves. The children are at home. The parents can see that they can't sit still. They can't focus. They can't take in information. And it's because of the foods in the house. We're seeing weight gain during the COVID. So we know people are eating more processed foods, which is kind of what you would expect, because they do numb out for a few minutes before you crash, like any drug would. You get a little period of numbing, and then the crash and the pain, which you stop by using the substance again. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's...
this is, it's hard if you don't know what to do. But the key to everything is to get into a group, and the Zoom is perfectly capable of bringing that group experience to this brain and engaging mirror neurons. And as long as the parents are happy and satisfied that that's what mirror neurons do. They make you you've got to be in a group or you're going to die. And that's what mirror neurons believe. So as long as the adults in the household are in that space, I'm in a group of people who don't eat processed foods, and you give them enough time to get used to it. You've got to give them, the parents, a lot of time and space. No deadlines, no agendas, no judgment or criticism, because this is something that only that person, those parents, can figure out for their household. You've got to give them a lot of options, and then you have to wait until their own little voice comes on and says, I'm ready. So that is the thing I think that a lot of health coaches miss. They want to, set deadlines, and they want to set goals, and you've got to be much, much, much more respectful of how difficult this is. If you push somebody, it's difficult. If you don't push them, they're actually able to move forward much more readily and much more reliably. They have to know when they're going to say to the child, no, there's no more of that, and we're not getting any more. Let's go outside and play. You've got to be ready to go outside and play and give them other activities and do puzzles with them and take them for bike rides. The parent has to have that kind of energy. If it's been a drugged up parent who's really exhausted, their coping mechanisms will naturally go to giving their children something that will keep them quiet.
Sure.
So it's a building process. The parents get stronger. They get more clear-headed. That takes time. And then
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not there yet, but I'm a lot better than I was, a year ago.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
It takes time. A year is perfectly normal. You can expect to spend a year just gradually getting the worst out, and then getting the next worst out, and then gradually finding other things to do. To get over drug and alcohol addiction takes on average 5 years from the time you start to try to get treatment to maybe your first year of abstinence. Processed food addiction is 10 times worse because of all the things that we've been talking about, the presence of a very aggressive, merciless industry, and the fact that it's starting so young, and there are so many different substances involved. All of those things make the time that it's going to take to stop lapsing longer. So for drug and alcohol addiction, maybe it's 5 years, but really it might be never. You might never stop lapsing with processed food addiction, but if you're in a group where lapsing is just not a big deal, you get right back on track, and you can make it and have a great life and be healthy. But if you're in a group that condemns lapsing, then the shame around the lapsing will pull you right down. And you could be in a lapse for a
you go right back to your comfort foods, right, that make you feel good.
Yeah.
So,
to stop the pain of the judgment.
Yeah,
so
right.
The group judges you. That is so painful. You turn to the processed foods. The group is actually driving the lapse to be longer. But if the group is, it's like a mosquito bite, it'll just get back on track, then they can just get back on track. They don't have to go through the whole judgment, pain, self-blame, self-hatred, soothe it with processed food. They don't have to go through that loop before they can just say, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't want to eat that anymore.
Yeah, and I want to put a plug for your group. You had a free Zoom session that I joined, I think it was a month or so ago during this whole COVID thing. And the one thing that I got out of it, besides all the science you went through, how the brain and the slides and all that stuff, the one thing that I remember is just how compassionate you were towards all the people that had questions and were saying, I'm going through this problem, and just how compassionate you were and understanding, and then not judging, and also I noticed you didn't even mention like the food, like specific foods. I think you just said, these substances, and you didn't say the specific foods to give them even that cue, right?
No, yeah. It's something that we really understand. Stress is a trigger. So we don't do anything stressful. We don't have deadlines. We have a lot of information, and we do a lot of visioning. So we do affirmations, for example, like, I only eat clean food. So now you're conditioning the brain. This is Pavlovian conditioning of neurons. And once those neurons are conditioned, I only eat clean food, then they can help you. But that's quite different from, I'm going to stop eating this stuff by Friday. Friday gets closer and closer. You don't have the neuron strength to actually quit. You don't have enough conditioned neurons to stand up to the addicted neurons and win. So Friday comes, you can't do it, and on a Friday you still can't do it. And then you're a failure. Painful. So all of these coaching techniques are making processed food addiction worse. You've got to give those neurons time to kind of absorb this new information and absorb it repeatedly enough that neuron is going to control the flow of neurotransmitters in the brain and thereby control behavior. It's a process. You've got to condition those neurons first. You've got to expose them to the information, and then also get those mirror neurons to start saying, oh, this is my food tribe. Okay, what are they doing? What are we copying? You've got to have healthy people around you to copy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so key to have that support system, whether it's online or in your family. And I was looking at some of the obesity statistics, and one of the common themes is just your family environment, right? What your family's eating, how you're brought up to eat, and that it's so hard to eat differently when you're in a household that do it. Yeah.
It's not realistic to tell somebody, oh, stop eating this and start eating that. You're in the middle of people who are drinking a fifth of scotch every night. They're your parents and they're your siblings, and they're all doing it, and they sit around the television and they do it. Your mirror neurons will not let you not do that. You've got those mirror neurons have to be given a different tribe to connect to. If you have a tribe to connect to, your mirror neurons will lead you towards clean eating. But mirror neurons evolved over 7 million years of brain evolution, and they do one thing. They copy. They drive you. They release neurotransmitters down into your brain that activate the right neurons so that you are doing what the people around you are doing. This is survival, because the people who are in tribes They had shelter, they had food, somebody to fight off predators, and somebody to deliver their babies. So if you were in a tribe, your genes got passed down. Your children survived and had children of their own. If you were off on your own, the hyenas got you. You were gone. If you were not mirror neuroned enough to stick with your tribe, be close to your tribe, do what your tribe is doing. The tribe is running, I'm running. Then the predators would pick you off, and you wouldn't live long enough to have children. So the non-mirroring genes did not get passed on. Mm-hmm. We are still, our conformance drive is what we call it, is running us. People don't realize it, but it really does run us. So if you know that, we do know that we can get mirror neurons to pay attention to a group on Zoom. And that connection, okay, I'm in a group. What do they do? Oh, they don't eat, okay, then I won't eat that. That allows the person's mirror neurons would be okay not copying the people in the household, not copying the family of origin, not copying the parents. But you've got to give those mirror neurons another tribe, or they won't, they're going to make you conform to some group. They're always going to be conforming to some group. Now you say, well, I live alone. The food industry's got you conforming. Because the food industry is showing you people being mean to each other, which is what most programming is, or dysfunctional, or something stressful. Stress activates the addiction. And they're showing you commercials with people sitting on sofas eating their food. So they've got that mirror function totally engaged. So if you live alone and you are binging and overeating, your mirror neurons have identified television, media as your tribe. And media is just, we know this now, that media is populated by people with eating disorders. They're either starving themselves or they're binging and then starving themselves, but they're disordered. And mirror neurons say, okay, oh, our tribe is disordered eating. Okay, well, we'll have disordered eating. It's that powerful. So yeah,
it's ingrained in our DNA, right? That's the problem. So, and then you add on top of that to survive, we also had to seek these sweet, high-calorie foods, right? And so we have these taste receptors that go after these sweet things, and now, those used to be scarce and used to be only seasonal, and now we have them all year round and all different kinds. And then even just the fruits, right? The genetically modified fruits that are much sweeter than they used to be. That's and then you add on the processed stuff. Now I want to.
If you go,
go ahead.
If you've ever looked for like wild strawberries, they're this big, and then you get strawberries as big as an apple now. Yes, so food is tremendously more available, and the carb content is much higher. Yeah.
So I want to go back to some numbers here. So 70% of U.S. adults are overweight or obese. There's about 2 billion people worldwide that are overweight. In the U.S., there's about 300,000 deaths related to obesity, and about $150 billion spent in healthcare related to these diseases. I want to personally add that what I didn't understand at first is that you can't outrun a bad diet unless you're some kind of elite athlete that's exercising several hours a day. Maybe that's the exception, but you can't outrun a bad diet. It's 90 to 95% of weight loss is through a diet. And, I think we missed an opportunity here with this COVID-19 and all these leaders giving their message, that we had a real opportunity here to focus on nutrition. and to get that message out. We know that there's comorbidities of COVID-19 deaths. A lot of them are related to metabolic disease, hypertension, diabetes, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, and obesity, and all those things. So we had this opportunity to say, if you improve your lifestyle and nutrition specifically, that is going to have probably a bigger effect of giving you resistance against this virus and any virus that comes along. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? I think our leadership kind of missed an opportunity there to really use that as a platform.
Well, because I have my undergraduate degree in economics and political science, I worked for a state legislature for 2 years before going back to and getting my switching over to business. I would say they didn't miss the opportunity. I would say they couldn't. They can't, because they depend on the processed food industry for campaign financing. Mm-hmm. So even if you would like to speak out, your political party is not going to let you.
Always goes back to the money. Sorry, it always goes back to the money.
Like Boris Johnson in the UK just came out and said, it's diet and exercise. I was told, he came out and he said no processed foods. It's not what the media reported. Diet and exercise, which is like saying to an alcoholic, diet and exercise. You see how ridiculous it is. Diet and exercise is not going to help alcoholism. Fighting through the addiction to alcohol without transferring it to some other substance, that will help. But 60% of the COVID deaths are in people with an underlying diet-related condition. So if you didn't have the diet-related conditions, we would not be having an epidemic of COVID. COVID is depending, in terms of epidemic, COVID is depending on processed food addiction and the comorbidities from that. So if, it's to me, and I know, people are going to forgive me for this, this is an epidemic of processed food addiction. You wouldn't have a COVID addiction. You wouldn't have a COVID epidemic without the processed food addiction underlying.
Yeah, I really like you going out there to say that, because it hasn't been said enough, except maybe in this circle of low carb, whole food nutrition. A lot of doctors are coming out to say that. So thanks for sharing that and for giving your insight in the political system and how, there's a lot of money behind this, and it's hard to. So how what would be your path going forward for someone in a leadership position that could say some of this, but maybe it would damage their career? What would be your advice, if any?
I saw how powerful the food industry was when Obama signed a Monsanto bill. I don't remember what the bill provided for, but I remember seeing a picture of him signing it with all those creepy executives behind him, and he looked so disgusted. Like, I can't believe I'm signing this. But the political system does run on processed food addiction money and the media. So another really interesting scenario is, so the media it's just been one screaming headline after another for months now. Hand washing, and now masks. But suppose all of those headlines had been stop eating processed foods, we would be in a completely different place. So media is also in the pocket. The processed food industry spends $10 billion a year on media, and it's, where are you going to get good information? It's going to be from people like you. You're like the like the Resistance in France in the World War II. There are pockets of people who are fighting back. There's a network of people like you, Mike, who are fighting back. So if I were a political leader, I would not be talking about this because I don't want my career to be over. So people say, well, why didn't you get a license? I don't have a license. I'm just a researcher. Because a license would prohibit me from talking about the whole picture. So I'm a researcher. All the services that my company provides are on a peer support level. We have advocates. We don't have any specialists, or someday, hopefully, we'll have a professional join us. But I think the best thing so I keep hoping that some of the faith leaders will come out. But it's too, when you get between somebody and their addictive substance, they hate you.
I mean,
they get really mad and they go the other direction. So it's an addiction.
And speaking of these,
look at the tobacco model, actually, where people just started coming out of the health system, the medical system. The doctors saw the research. It was so clear that they got on board. It's not clear. The research on food addiction, even though there are 2,000 studies cited in the textbook, you've got to put this puzzle piece next to that one, and then this one and this one in order to get the enormity of the picture, and also to be persuaded that the picture is credible, that this really is happening. If you really need things like Nickelodeon carried these 500 commercials per Saturday morning to 65 million households, and it only takes 5 commercials. You've got to have evidence like that, which we now have. It's going to be people like you, Mike. It's not going to be political leaders. It's not going to be... I did my first grand rounds this morning for a hospital system in New Jersey with the psychiatric department, which means I gave my first talk to a hospital system. And before the morning was over, we got word that the pediatric department also wanted us to come and talk.
Oh, that's exciting, yeah.
So,
congratulations.
Maybe we've just gotten something off the ground. The health professionals, they've trained so hard. Their hearts are in the right place. They're doing everything they've been trained to do, and it's not working. And their patients are dying and suffering. It's particularly the pediatricians. They know they've got this 8-year-old, and if everything that professional does not work, that 8-year-old will have a miserable, miserable life. Die young after a lot of illness. So I think, it's been going on for 30 years now, that the health professionals are just being driven to look for some other explanation. And here we are, we're all ready for them. We've got the textbook. We've got 2.5 years of experience with Zoom online meetings. They're going to hear a podcast like yours, and maybe they'll start to hear grand rounds in their own hospital system. So we could be at a tipping point. We could be. And it could be that COVID pushes people over, because those health professionals, they know darn well that it is a diet-related epidemic. Everybody says, oh no, this is a virus. This is a diet-related COVID epidemic.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I just wanted to touch on the faith part, right? That, there's a lot of casseroles and buffet type things that are associated with faith, and I've gotten to the point now that it's hard for me to go to those, because last time I went to one, I counted how many desserts there were. There was more desserts than there were like the main entrees, and I'm just like
by a factor of 2.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk. We've talked a little bit about juices, right? And we know, I think it's maybe like 12. It needs like 12 apples for one little carton of juice, apple juice or something.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
It's some insane amount that you would never eat, right? If you just ate the apple, because of the fiber in there. But let's talk a little bit about dairy, right? So dairy's kind of touted as a health food, and there's different kinds of dairy. We have a local farm here that's really good. They actually have raw milk. It comes, right out of the cow. So what are your thoughts on dairy? Some people say it's good. Some people say it's bad. Some people say, well, if you have the cultured dairy, like the cheeses and the sour creams and that kind of thing, it's better than the regular milk because it doesn't have the sugar in it. Tell us a little bit about dairy.
Oh, I know people love dairy. It's not for humans. Of course, dairy is for a baby cow. It's for a calf, a 100-pound calf. And dairy is perfectly designed to put that calf to sleep so that it absorbs nutrients and put 500 pounds on that calf. So how does dairy do that? Well, dairy contains 4 different kinds of natural casomorphine, and all mammal breast milk contains these naturally occurring morphines in the milk. All mammal milk has these morphines. So what are they designed to do? They're designed to put the baby to sleep while the baby absorbs the nutrient. And then the baby outgrows it and everything's fine. 4 different kinds of casomorphine. The beta casomorphine has been shown to attach to the receptors in the brain that are there for opium and morphine. So opium and morphine attach to the same receptors in the brain as these naturally occurring morphines in dairy or in any kind of breast milk.
Wow.
So that should be the end of the story right there, but it gets worse.
It gets worse, oh no.
I have a great researcher. This is one of my all-time favorite researchers. His name is Bodo Melnick. He lives in Germany. He's a German. I've actually gotten to meet him and speak to him if I had to choose between Mick Jagger and Bodo Melnick, I would have chosen Bodo Melnick. He's that important to the world. And he's a geneticist. And he's the one who discovered that dairy turns on the weight gain gene, the acne gene, and the prostate cancer gene. So we have genetics. Genetics do not predetermine our destiny. Environment turns on particular genetics. If you don't turn on the gene, it doesn't ever bother you. But when you're ingesting dairy, it turns on the prostate cancer gene and the weight gain gene and the acne gene. So this should be like a no-brainer. Why is this substance being sold in grocery stores? Why are we giving it to children? Why are adults eating this? It's because, just like we have the Tobacco Institute to really churn out false information about tobacco, we've got the Dairy Council. And they're just busy churning out false information about the value of dairy. The whole calcium argument. It's totally bogus. You need 8 minerals present in combination to be absorbed by a bone. So having dairy, a lot of extra dairy, you need the other 7. why aren't we talking about magnesium and potassium and all the other 7 as a group? No. We only talk about calcium because of the Dairy Council. The Dairy Council is churning out this mythology. Oh, you need extra calcium. People take calcium supplements and they end up with calcium, very painful calcium deposits on their bones. Yeah, it's not for humans.
So is there any difference between, the like a milk, just straight milk, which has a lot of sugar, it even, says on the label, and something like a sour cream or a yogurt that if you look at the label, there's very little sugar in, or just cream itself?
No, there's not really a big difference. The addicted neurons are they're very capable of transferring addictions. So they will, if you're addicted to one thing and you stop using that, it'll just transfer to something else. So giving up dairy as a class will prevent the brain from transferring to another dairy product. And yeah, okay. Concentrating dairy into cheese, to me, is like concentrating poppy seeds into opium. It's the concentrating that makes the product addictive. So like a lot of plants have naturally occurring endorphins in them, but when you process them and concentrate them, then they become powerful enough to addict that reward pathway. So cheese is to milk as opium is to poppies.
Well, that explains why I like cheese so much.
Yes.
So what are your...
fat actually activates the same pathway as marijuana. Sugar activates the same pathway as dopamine. And then there's a little bit of salt in dairy. So it's kind of like a perfect storm of sugar, fat, salt. Yeah. There's a reason why you go in the grocery store and the cheese section is like half the back of the store. There are reasons for this.
So what about some of these other foods that are, I call them kind of transition foods, like the monk fruit type sweeteners, the almond flour, the low carb thing that's going on, the kind of alternative chips that aren't made with vegetable oils, the sprouted grains, maybe. So what are your thoughts on those foods?
The body is not recognizing them as food. And I don't know that there's any research particularly on almond flour, but nuts in general are addictive. They're higher in tryptophan, which is a precursor for serotonin. And even though it doesn't look like a nut anymore, when you put that in your mouth, your body says, oh, it's a nut. It doesn't know that it's been ground into a powder. It's just, oh, it's a nut. Serotonin release. We can get high off of this. So yeah, the nut flours, the nut milks, it's bad. It's really bad out there. Grains, there are gluten-containing grains, and gluten also has a morphine in it. It's a naturally occurring morphine. It's called gluteomorphine. And American wheat has a very high level compared to European or Middle Eastern wheat. And so that's another big factor in this, is the gluten. Yeah.
So what does that leave us with foods we can eat? Just meat and vegetables and maybe a few fruits?
Yeah. Yes, the answer is yes. It's meats and vegetables and the low sugar fruits, and of course good quality fats. I'm on the cold pressed fats. I know there's a movement around for no seed oils, but
right.
I don't know. I'm fine with olive oil, cold pressed oils, coconut oil, and then animal fats. Like the whole diabolical sugar industry telling us to take the skin off of our meats and cut the fat off.
Yeah.
Dang, that was bad. It just drove us to sugar addiction.
Yeah, I think that getting rid of these things is easier too. There's this whole kind of carnivore movement and I think that's the big plus of this is you're cutting out so many, pretty much everything. All this dairy and some of these things that are kind of on the edge that can trigger those neurons, like you were talking about. Where if you just eat meat, even if it's just for a certain period of time, you're gonna feel better, and then I think it's a great elimination diet as a baseline, and then you could start introducing the other foods in one at a time and see how your body does with them.
Yeah. The thing that we know from the whole history of humans on the planet is that it's not the food plan. Because we have Eskimos who are thriving on blubber and sea animals, all the way to jungle dwellers who rarely get to eat any animal protein. Very hard to find. And they're all doing great. They're all doing fine. The problem is the addictive substances that have been added to our food. So once you get those addictive substances out, people can enjoy a lot of different food plans. I agree with you about the carnivore plan, which is if you are so brain fogged and so tired and so depressed and so addicted, and you didn't ask for this, nobody called you up and said, oh, would you like to buy a whole bunch of substances that are going to put you in this totally depleted state? If you can't think your way through what vegetables am I going to eat? What fruits am I going to eat? What starches am I going to eat? What proteins and what fats? You can always at least get through withdrawal, because there is a withdrawal syndrome, just by eating meat. You can do that. And then do exactly what you're saying, Mike. Just start adding back, maybe some of the low-carb vegetables, and trying some of the low-carb fruits, keeping up your animal protein and your fat content until you get tired or you get craving or you get brain fog. It's not a bad strategy.
Yeah, I really like
it. I know the depths of the condition. So the depths of processed food addiction you are gone. You're like, you want to do all these things and you cannot. It's not that you don't want to do them. You want to do them. You want to get up. You want to clean your house. You want to play with your kids. You want to cook a good meal, but you are too tired and brain fogged and depressed. You're too sick. You're too poisoned. You're too just debilitated. And at a younger and younger age all the time. So this is the mistake I think that everybody who tries to help food addicted people makes, is they don't see the damage. They don't see the depletion in the person. And so they keep expecting these people to do things that they absolutely cannot do. Like, we don't have any rules in our addiction reset community about food. We have lists. These are the toxic substances that are parading as food, and this is the real food. And you can do any combination of the real food you want, and you can take as long as you want. Please go slowly. Please go slowly on this list of excluded foods. Anytime somebody is being pressured, they're stressed, and that activates a relapse, and then they quit.
Yeah.
So you've got to really, really, really go very, very slow with them. I just started a really interesting book called Tiny Habits. And I realized that for some of our people, even just asking them to respond to a PM that says, how was your day? That is too much.
Really?
We've just gone through to a system where we're going to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is your day going, with 10 being the best, so that all they have to do is put in a number.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing that's so heroic about these people is they are really sick. They are really poisoned. They didn't ask for it. They're being blamed for it. They're being traumatized. Everybody blames them for it. Their body shape is being reviled by the culture. They are just being traumatized right, left, and center. And yet, they get up and they go to work. They get up and they take care of their kids. They get up and they do what they're able to do in this really depleted condition. They're in pain. They have joint pain. They have inflammation. They have heart disease. They have diabetes. They have high blood pressure. They're sick. They're poisoned. And they still get up and do life. That just fills my heart. That just moves me so deeply. Yeah, we're constantly, even though I've been up to my eyeballs in this field for almost 25 years, I'm getting a new perspective that there is a group of people who are in that state. They're sick, they're poisoned, they want to get well, they come into the addiction reset community, and they can't respond. So we're always asking ourselves, I want to go to them. I don't want them to come to me. That's too much work. That's not fair. I want to see where they are. I want to see what they can do. And I want to meet them where they are. I want to give them hope where they are. And that is something that this culture has missed entirely.
So take me through that a little bit. Do like a little mock consult. So, I recognize I have a problem with these processed foods. I don't know a path forward, but I heard about you, Dr. Joan. What do I do?
So of course, I hope this is appropriate. We do, in my opinion, have the only program on the planet that recognizes what's really going on and addresses it. So if I were going to give the really short answer, please go to foodaddictionreset.com and sign up for the Addiction Reset community. Even if your addiction is telling you don't have the money, it's your first fight back against the addiction. I'm not spending money on you anymore, addiction. I'm spending money on recovery. So the next time the addiction says, let's go get blah, 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 you can say, no, that money got spent already. It's being spent on recovery. So when you sign up, you get access to a Facebook group, for example. And for some people, that is the beginning of mirror neuron kind of re-radaring, taking the mirror neurons off of mainstream culture and getting them onto a new tribe, the ARC. So we start really gently, mirror neurons and engagement at a Facebook group. And we also send out 2 emails a day. So just open the email. And we are increasingly spending time on PMing. And realizing that even an addicted brain, trying to fulfill life's obligations from a poisoned place, that answering that question, how was your day, might be too much. But we'll start them off, on a scale of 1 to 10, 4. Okay, well, we're with you. Just know that we're with you. We know that we're fighting for mirror neuron engagement. We're with you. You're in the ARC. It'll get better. That might be where we start. If the person is comfortable coming to a video chat, they will start just accelerating, because the mirror neuron engagement, you want to get those mirror neurons to start to believe, oh, the ARC is my tribe. If you can do that eye to eye, mirror neurons are much more responsive. They will start firing quite differently, faster. But not everybody can get into a video chat if they've been traumatized in a support group before with unrealistic expectations, judgment, cruelty, being fired, like being kicked out of groups because they think that you ought to be able to adhere to a food plan like on day one. You're not a full citizen, you're not beloved, you're not cherished until you're eating the way they want you to eat, which is sometimes includes addictive substances. A lot of these groups require that you eat grains. They require that you eat dairy. And if you don't do it, you get kicked out. And that's traumatizing. So if people have had traumatic experiences in support groups before, they might come into a video chat and completely freak out, terrorized. And this is understandable. So they was like, don't come in. Could you do a conference call? Or could you just listen to a recording? Or if this is okay, let's just hang out here on Facebook and work by private messenger. And if you can open the email in the morning email, and read the newsletter, great. Maybe the podcast is too provocative, because the podcast is typically a recording of our conference call. So we're listening, we're watching. What are all the traumas that this person has endured? And what can we do just to make that first little connection with another person and start to get kindness and compassion and patience and understanding and release from the guilt. This is not your fault. And that program failed because it wasn't the right program, and that one, 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 and that one. Hundreds of programs. None of them recognizing what's going on in the brain. All of those weight loss programs and eating disorder programs are set up to make food addiction worse.
And they focus on the rational side too, right? They focus on that frontal cortex. Count these calories or these points, right? Instead of the actual source of the problem.
The source of the problem is that mirror neurons are fixated on mainstream culture. And then if you can get those mirror neurons to fixate on a healthy eating group, this is why the ARC offers 4 live events per day. It's programming, and you have to have the hours. If you were learning a foreign language and you needed to move to another country where somebody didn't speak English, and you needed to speak that foreign language, you would be in immersion. You would be programming neurons as fast as you could. You would be listening to language tapes and in conversation groups from morning to night. And that is exactly the same process by which we are reprogramming neurons, retraining them, rewiring them, so that they're stuffed full of recovery information, and the neuron is referring to that memory bank. Oh, what do I do in this circumstance? Oh, I remember. Yeah. They're depending on the historical information in their memory banks. It's encoding. That's what neurons do. They encode, store, and then refer to information, experiences. And if you've got a whole bunch of ARC experiences in there, they're going to refer to their ARC experience and say, oh yeah, we don't need that. But if you don't have enough ARC experiences in there, they're still going to be referring to, oh yeah, my parents eat that, my siblings eat that, everybody in my household eats that, all my friends eat that. That's what we eat.
So how do you make that?
You're in a race to get enough ARC experience into that neuron that it will be able to have enough of those neurons that they will be able to secrete enough neurotransmitter to control behavior. It's mechanical. It's totally mechanical. It's not about willpower. It's not about childhood issues. It's not about, you've got to address childhood issues at some point, which we do with kindness, not therapy, not analysis, but just kindness. And then people start being kind to themselves, and then they can endure the things that have happened to them. It's none of those things that everybody says it is. It's not self-sabotage. It's not trying hard enough. It's not any of those things. It's a strictly mechanical problem. They've been in an environment where the stuff was available and heavily advertised and cheap enough to get a lot of, and they've got a whole bunch of programmed neurons that tell them to eat that. That's what an addiction is. It's just a question of programming enough counteracting neurons until the person has control.
So how do you take that first step once you've joined a group of like-minded individuals? How do you take that first step of, telling your family members or those that are around you that, this is my goal? What can you help me with this? And how do you help them understand what you're going through so that they're not, giving you that cookie or donut or whatever?
Yeah. We're starting to make videos on this. We have a huge Facebook group. We're almost at 16,000 people.
Wow.
Food addiction education. So somebody can certainly join there. And we have handouts that explain to a household what's really going on. Hopefully the household will come on board, but typically the whole household is addicted. And as I was saying, people are furious if you suggest anything related to separating them from their substance. Because the addicted brain will tell them, well, you're going to just be craving and miserable for the rest of your life if you give me up. And the exact opposite is true, but addictions lie. Addictions delude and deceive. That's part of the problem. So, we listen to what's going on in each household, and we try to set boundaries. We suggest that people get like a locker that you can lock to put the household's processed foods in and keep it locked. I have told people, not very many people will do this, that if a family member leaves something out, to pour vinegar on it or put a poison sticker on it. But there are other things you can do that are kinder. Like I suggest to people that we have these ARC meetings 4 times a day, that they play them where other household members can hear them. They're chock full of amazing information. That helps. So now, if you think, okay, the brain is just totally vulnerable to soaking up information from the environment, let's control the environment. Let's not fight with our family members. Let's control the environment. So you put on some fantastic meal in your slow cooker every day, and the house is constantly filled with the smell of clean food. After a while, the brain will it's helpless. It'll start to tune into that clean food. You're provoking that brain. And the person, you don't have to get their cooperation to start making these great meals. The thing about the slow cooker is the smell will be in the air all day. And a slow cooker's on for 12 hours or whatever. So you're controlling the sound in the environment and you're controlling the smell. That's not going to get you the whole way. Remember, the most powerful part of the brain is mirror neurons. But as your mirror neurons are now taking direction from your support group and no longer taking direction from your household members for food decisions, and take direction on other things, but not for food decisions, then what's happening in the rest of the household? All of those mirror neurons are looking at you, and they're drawn to copying. It might take months. Plus, you're making clean food available all the time. So I know when, almost 25 years ago, when I realized that sugars and flours were making me rage, I turned to my family and I said, I'm not going to give you foods that make you mad at me. I knew about the stress pathways in the brain. I didn't know about the stress pathways. I just knew that I finally got a raging problem under control when I stopped eating sugars and flours. And I realized that the sugars and flours I was giving my children were making them irritable with me. So I said, I'm just not going to give this to you anymore. I had a great therapist. She gave me 4 rules. You can't bring it in the house. You can't eat it in front of me. I'm not buying it, and I'm not taking you to get it. So I'm no longer going to enable you, and you cannot trigger me. And that worked great. Every time they left the house, they had a bag of food. They had a breakfast, a lunch, and 2 snacks. And they had enough food to last them until I picked them up from school. So that's key. And actually, I'll mention my little manual, my meal prep manual. It's Dr. Ifland's, I don't know what it's called, meal prep for food addicts or something, but it's on Amazon. It's free right now on the Amazon Unlimited, Kindle Unlimited. You can make all your food for the week in 2 hours on the weekend. And that's what I started to do for my family. I was just going crazy trying to make all these meals.
Right.
To pre-adolescent, 2 preteens and a husband. So I would just, make an entire turkey, or I would make an entire roast, and I'd wrap it, bundle it up, and put it in the freezer, and get it out for the second half of the week. I would make, a whole pile of pork chops. I would make an entire chicken, or I would make like just rows of drumsticks because they were good for snacks. And then the fastest food on the planet was in my refrigerator. I wasn't ever tempted to stop for fast food because I had already gotten something out of my refrigerator. So the point is to cook everything at the beginning of the week. And then through the week, when things are busy, you're pulling out food that's cooked. It needs to thaw. And then you just cut it up and put it on plates or put it into lunch boxes or whatever.
Yeah, I like that because you don't have to rush, or you're not tempted to go to the fast food place, right? Eat that quick snack.
Not an answer. You're driving home. You're trying to get home, and your mirror neurons see everybody lined up at fast food, and they're saying we should line up. Your car wants to drive itself into the fast food place. But you've got this other voice. I got food at home. We just gotta make it home. And then you get home and you're safe. I got food at home is a pretty good argument.
Yep. So I have to ask the question. So, people have to be motivated to make change in whatever they're doing. And, when you have a food addiction, usually it's accompanied by obesity or shame. And you finally recognize that, okay, this is a problem that I need to address. And sometimes that takes years to develop, right? For me, I was on the standard American diet and until I hit about 31 or so, and I was prescribed some antidepressants, and that kind of triggered the weight gain for me. And it took me about 7 years to finally, until last year, to find something that worked. And that was, for me, it's intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, 1 to 2 meals a day, and the whole foods. But my question is, if somebody doesn't have that, I guess, visual cue that, they're eating the diet that whatever they want, basically, and they're not gaining weight, or they don't see any negative effects, what kind of advice do you have to them? It might not happen, metabolic disease can take years, right, before you really see the effects. So what kind of advice would you have for them?
I would say to anybody, try getting off, because there's something called unconscious or subconscious impairment. And you think that you're just normally tired, or you think that you're just normally a little bit foggy, or you think it's normal to be a little bit sad, a little depressed, because you've had it your whole life. This is an addiction that starts with 50% sugar baby formula. So you've never not had it, and you think it's normal. And you think, well, this doesn't affect me. It doesn't make me, it's not doing anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought until age 44 that cravings were normal until mine went away on January 4th, 1996. So processed foods are harmful. And there's this whole mythology in a lot of recovery groups that only some people are affected by processed foods. And their measure is, well, that person can eat one and put away the rest of the pack, so they don't have a problem. That is not true. Processed foods are harmful like cigarettes are harmful. I read something once, this writer said the harmful effects of cigarettes are so well known that even smoking one cigarette would have to be considered a pathological act.
Wow.
In other words, it's an act of self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
So the only difference between cigarettes and processed foods is that phrase, the harm of cigarettes, is so well known. So people don't know the incredible harm of one bite of a processed food. So you can't say the thing I would say is go to our website, Food Addiction Resources, click on handouts, and scroll down to the two lists, unprocessed foods and excluded foods. Open up the unprocessed food list, cross off all the foods that you know don't work for you. Like, I don't eat citrus, and I don't eat nightshade, and I don't eat gourds, I don't eat starches anymore. But just whatever food plan has worked the best for you, cross off everything that you don't want to eat. If people say, oh, you have starches on your food plan, cross them off. Don't eat them. These are just unprocessed foods, but not all of them work for all people. And then look at the list of excluded foods and do your best. Give yourself plenty of time. Just work your way down the list, or do what you suggest, Mike. Just say, okay, I know I'm good with broccoli, and I know I'm good with chicken, and I'm good with carrots, and I'm good with blueberries, and I really like fish, and I really like beef. Okay, if you really like those 15 things, go to the grocery store, buy a lot of those 15 things, put them in your house, get all the processed foods out of the house, and just eat those 15 things. And you will get through withdrawal, and things will start happening like right away. Within the first 4 days, the bloating goes down, the cravings might stop, you will go through withdrawal. You'll have a headache and stomach ache and lethargy and irritability. That's pretty standard. Cravings will get worse on day 3 and 4, and then they stop. And you're taking your blood glucose if you're a diabetic, and you notice that it's heading straight towards normal. You're taking your blood pressure if you have high blood pressure, and you're noticing that it's dropping. And you're calling your doctor or your prescriber and saying, how do I adjust my medications? It can happen in the first week. It can happen really in the first day. Because if you don't put the glucose in your blood system, it's not, going to be elevated.
Right. Yeah.
So then you notice in the second week that you've got a tremendous amount of new energy. And you notice pretty much in that first week that the fog lifts. And you know that you are much, much less anxious. The adrenaline level in your body is dropping. And then about week 3, you notice that things start to taste better. And you notice that your allergies are better and that sinus infection finally cleared up and you haven't really had to yell at anybody. And you're just feeling more cheerful. All these incredible things happen. Your skin is clearing up. You're brighter. You can see better because the blood pressure in your eyes is better. The eczema clears up. The plantar fasciitis goes away. The joint pain stops. The inflammation stops. You stop having racing heart. This group of toxins is very systemic. Every cell is affected. So I would just say, please, please, please try. You may not know you have a little depression, or you may not know you have a little fatigue. Like I remember when I finally gave up caffeine, I just thought I normally had a little headache at the end of every afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of the afternoon. I'd been working hard or whatever. No. It was caffeine withdrawal. So it is worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. Because you don't want to go through life as a drugged up human being. You want to go through life as a human being. We're vibrant, and we're fun, and we're funny, and we're incredibly creative, and we're great problem solvers. I mean, undrugged up humans are just so much fun to be around. I'm around them for hours and hours every day. And, you just love them. They're fighting a good fight. They're determined. They get knocked down, they get right up again. I think it's thrilling to be around people who are getting out from under this oppressor. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Joan, I know we could probably go on for another hour, but I think we need to wrap up here. It's been a pleasure having you on. And
thank you so much, Mike.
I love this message. It's something that I'm passionate about because I've gone through it, and I'm still on my journey. I'm still not 100% off processed foods, but I've come a long way, and And I really
give yourself plenty of time and space.
Yeah, that's the key.
Don't rush anything.
It's progress, not perfection, right? And so. Dr. Joan, leave us with one last call to action and where people can find you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Get over to the Facebook group, Food Addiction Education. You can always email me at gethelp@foodaddictionreset.com. And we do have also intensive programs at resetweek.com. Our basic daily program is at foodaddictionreset.com. And we're also training managers, community managers. So if you would like to have a job in this field, go to Food Addiction Recovery Advocate. And all you have to be is somebody who struggled with food. You don't need any other kind of training. We will give you the rest of the training. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, viewers, listen to Joan's message here. We'll have the links to her websites down below, and check out that free meal plan that she has in the Kindle Unlimited store. So there's a free resource, and I'm sure you have free resources on your website as well for people to look at. So check that out. This is, like I said, this is a topic that I'm passionate about. With 2 billion people having some kind of obesity and overweight, I'm really glad to share this message. So
yeah, make sure that we get the link when you publish, and then we'll put it out on our social media as well.
Okay, definitely we'll do that. All right, thanks for watching this show, viewers. If you like this episode, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next interesting person that we have on. Mike Blasi signing out. Thanks for listening to a podcast with interesting people. Please subscribe and leave a review or comment.
And support us by sharing our episodes on social media. We really appreciate it. And for more information, visit us at apodcast.com. Thanks.